We now have the pleasure of being joined by Austin Veazey. He is the lead basketball writer for Nole Gameday by Sports Illustrated. Austin, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Appreciate you guys having me.
So we're here to talk about Syracuse, Florida State, a matchup that already happened once this year back in early December. Since the Orange, just barely stopped that home record streak, what's been going on with the Seminoles over the past month?
Probably a lot like you guys. It's been a very up and down month. You lose to South Carolina, and what was basically a road game. It was in Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's about 30 minutes from South Carolina's campus. You get demolished on the road at Wake Forest, but then you come home. You beat Louisville. You beat Miami, who are undefeated heading into those games in conference. So up and down play. Florida State's offense is still trying to find their way, trying to figure out what they want to do. And the defense isn't the same as in years past. So they're trying to get things figured out. It's still a super young team. They'll be fine here soon. It's a struggle to get there.
It looks like they're starting to figure it out a little bit more, though. I mean, they have won 3 of the first 4 games since the actual start of ACC play, not the pseudo start that these two teams had in early December. What has started to look at least a little bit better for the Noles that's translated to wins?
I think they're communicating a little bit better and they're understanding their game plans a little bit more. There's still some things that look helter-skelter. Against the Miami game, or in the Miami game, they were really limiting possessions more than they have in any other game. I think it was only a 62 possession game, which is the fewest Miami's played all season. But it was purposeful. They were really trying to keep the ball out of Isaiah Wan's hands, and that was pretty successful. So they're still getting their game plans figured out, but they're getting there. Hopefully they don't shoot 3 of 40 or 4 of 30 from 3 again. Because right now they're just not a good 3-point shooting team, and until they get that figured out, it's going to be a little bit of tough sledding for them.
Like most teams, there was a bit of a COVID stoppage for FSU. Didn't play from December 15th to January 1st. How do you think that affected the Noles this season? Because I could see it both, delaying them from getting together, but also, providing a bit of a reset or some much needed rest.
I mean, the first thing is to help guys get in the gym, which is what they needed. Guys needed to get shot ups, get some reps. Even if there were a lot of guys out with COVID, the number I'd heard was 6 players. But the guys that weren't affected were able to get in the gym, get shots up, get repetitions, build some chemistry off the court, which is something also needed when you have a super young team that hasn't been around each other a lot. They're able to get some chemistry built up. Overall, it helps some guys. Like, it really helped Naheem McLeod, the backup big. He's looked much better since the COVID pause. And then Caleb Mills, who had 23 in the first half against Louisville. I think that was big for his confidence to get a game like that. Then on the flip side, you've got some guys like Anthony Polite and Wyatt Wilkes that are still struggling. So it benefited some guys, didn't help some other guys. It's kind of like every COVID pause. I think every team goes through it, where you have these pauses. Some teams are in a rhythm to get in that COVID pause and they come out in a funk. Some teams come in a funk and come out fine. So it's different for every team.
You mentioned McLeod. I think he's a really interesting guy because when FSU played Syracuse, he was coming off an injury, so he didn't play a ton. But every time he came into the game, he dominated, finished 3 of 3 from the floor, 5 rebounds, and I think just about 10 minutes. Now it's been, a while since that initial injury, but his minutes aren't necessarily super expanded. What is keeping him from being more than like a 10-minute per game player?
He's still super raw. I was not a fan of his coming into the season. I thought he was talented, but I thought he was really far away from realizing it, kind of like Quincy Ballard. But he's grown a lot. He's really grown a lot mentally, and that's huge. I think part of the minutes thing is because Florida State switches everything. There are times where he can get left alone on an island. You saw it a lot against Miami, where, yeah, he has this huge impact offensively because he's 7'4" and you can just throw it over the top. But defensively, Isaiah Wan was hunting him out. Cameron McGusty was hunting him out. Against Louisville, he was able to play a couple more minutes, and he played against Louisville really, really well. He had some of the biggest plays in that game that kept Florida State, just far enough away from Louisville to keep it from getting interesting. But I think he just still has so much to learn, especially offensively, and really both sides of the ball. There are times where I think he's kind of left out to dry, where he gets the ball too far away from the basket. He's one of those guys where he shouldn't get the ball more than 4 feet away from the basket right now. And defensively, he's got to learn how to play on the perimeter, because I mean we've seen our bigs in the past get toasted like that back when we had Dominic Olenichuk, Chris Kamaji at times when he'd switch on the perimeter. They got to get used to this, and I think he's talented enough. He's got pretty quick feet for someone his size. He'll get there, and if anyone can develop him, it's Coach Hamilton and assistant coach Jones. So he'll get there. Just take some time.
Obviously, arguably the biggest development project is Matt Cleveland, star freshman who didn't have his best against Syracuse in the first matchup, 6 points in 18 minutes, but he's started to really get it going. He's averaging a bit over 20 minutes per game and scoring almost 15 in the last 4. What kind of flipped for him? What's he doing now that's helping him be so effective offensively?
He has realized that he can perform athletically at this level. We see it from every jump in level of basketball. From high school to college, people kind of wonder, can I still hang athletically? Matthew Cleveland can absolutely hang athletically. And once he realized these guys aren't that much better than me, I can go out and still get to the basket whenever I want. He became the 5-star freshman that we all expected. He's been unreal around the rim. He's had some crazy finishes these last few games. There was one play against Miami where he was driving from the wing on the left side, looked like he was going to get a layup, and then Malik Osborne was able to seal off the defender, and he just contorts his body and dunks it somehow. Really, really special play. He's going to be a really good player, especially once that jump shot comes around. That's the one thing he's still got to get figured out, scoring from 14 feet out, because his free throw is not that great. I think he's shooting about 60% on the year from the free throw line, just off the top of my head. And then he's only made 3 threes on the year. So teams aren't respecting that right now, but I think they will hopefully by next year if he comes back to Tallahassee for a second season, which I think he will. And the one thing that he's really got to improve on, especially for this game, is distributing. Because what Florida State likes to do against Syracuse is put a guy in the high post and let a guy play out of there. Did in the past with Terrence Mann, Brian Angola. It seemed like they wanted it to be Matthew Cleveland for the first game. I went back through it last night. He had 6 high post catches, but Florida State only scored out of one of those chances. I think there's 2 or 3 turnovers. I think that's where they want him to be. I think it has to be Caleb Mills for this game, just because he's the best distributor. He's the best mix of scoring and distributing. But I could tell they want to be Cleveland because of his size. I just don't know how he's going to handle the pressure, especially on the road in the Carrier Dome.
You mentioned earlier that last game, Florida State shot 4 of 30 from 3. And a lot of people here, I think, thought it was good defense. And I think the tape speaks a bit differently. There were quite a handful of open 3-pointers that the Seminoles just missed. Obviously, Osborne's shooting well from 3, and he didn't shoot well in that game, but that's probably a blip. Who else, though, is coming in and trying to support that? Because the Seminoles are shooting about 25% from 3 in conference right now.
Yeah, it's a struggle right now. There's still – Florida State's a team that's always had to play inside out for them to have success, get 2 feet in the paint and then kick out for 3. The Syracuse running what looked like a 1-3-1, but was still playing like a 2-3 in that first game, it really just messed them up mentally. Didn't know quite what to do, didn't know quite how to attack it. Because we have a great 1-3-1 offense. I mean, if you go through the past few years, you go through the Xavier tournament game in 2018. The reason Florida State came back in that game when they were down 12 is because Xavier went 1-3-1, and Florida State attacked it. They abused it. And that's been a theme for the last few years. And then Syracuse throws what looks like a 1-3-1, but still really 2-3. It really messed Florida State up. I'm assuming they've practiced that a lot this week, getting ready for it. And as well as practice their normal 2-3 zone offense. But it's a struggle shooting from 3 right now. Mills has had his moments. Evans is still hesitant. Worley's still hesitant. Wyatt Wilkes is really struggling. I think he's like 28% from 3. Anthony Polite's still really struggling. I think he's just being asked to do a little bit too much, and it's kind of got him out of rhythm on offense. Cleveland's not a shooter, at least not at this point in his career. Cameron Fletcher's been dealing with injuries. He had a broken wrist in the offseason. Then you get in season, he hurts his face against Purdue. Plays very few minutes for the next few games. He's been healthy for the last couple. Now it seems like he's dealing with another wrist injury, just from what we've heard. It really is a struggle. And even Malik Osborne, who, at one point he was shooting, I think, 52% from 3, but Entering the Miami game, he missed his last 7 threes and went 2 of 4, or no, 1 of 3 against Miami. So really just one of his last 12. He's dealing with an ankle injury that he suffered against NC State. And you can just tell he has no lift on his shot. It's kind of a struggle right now. So it's not great from the perimeter. Florida State's still trying to get that figured out. And it kind of hurts to watch because Florida State's had some really good shooters in the past. When you go through the PJ Savoys, even Nate Jack, Devin Vassell. I mean, you've got guys that have been able to light up from three. They really don't have that this year.
One thing they will have, though, that they didn't have last time against Syracuse is a fully ready, in rhythm Raekwon Evans. He was there last game, but he was returning off the absence and didn't have as much time to practice as everyone else does. How much of an impact do you think that could make, that Evans is more seamlessly integrated in the lineup this time around than he was a month ago?
It's huge. A lot of Florida State fans aren't the biggest fans of Raekwon Evans. And I think it's because, people have this certain vision of a point guard where he's either a great scorer or he's a great passer. Evans is just fine in both of those, but what he is he's a phenomenal defender. I mean, he's arguably the best defender on this team on the perimeter. When he has his mental capabilities set to it, he can lock down anybody. And I think that's huge against a guy like Joe Girard, who kept hitting timely threes against Florida State in that first game. I think it was 4 of 6 or 4 of 8 from 3, and it seemed like every single one was a backbreaker. Now you could put a guy on Evans who's big, he's stocky, can really be physical when he wants to be, and I think that can get Girard out of his rhythm. And you're not relying on a true freshman point guard in Worley, who's shown some flashes, but he's been really inconsistent, and he's really has some freshman mistakes this season. I'm excited about him for the future, but to win now, you need Evans to be that guy defensively and attack the basket when you need, because they drew up a great set for him at the end of the Miami game to get him two free throws and win that game.
Zooming out a little bit more now, I think for Syracuse, for at least the last week or so, it's been a bit of a trying time. They're hanging around 500. They dipped below it, have come back, and it really feels like they have to get going and go on a crazy run right now, or it's kind of over. Is there a feeling of desperation similar to that right now in Tallahassee? Like, I know that the record is better, but is it still a desperate feeling, or is it a little bit calmer right now over with Leonard Hamilton?
I think to the fans, it's a little bit more desperate than to the program. Just because Florida State's a football school, the fans have that football mindset. You lose one game, we're screwed. What are we going to do? Basketball is not quite the same way, but at the same time, the ACC's so down this year where there's not enough chances to get quality wins. I think if you look at Florida State's schedule right now, they only have 4 Q1 chances on the schedule. And that can change because I don't know how Virginia Tech's 39th in that. It makes no sense to me. But you play Duke twice and you play Carolina once on the road, play Virginia on the road, but they're hit and miss. So Florida State has to get wins at this point. And to get one back against Syracuse, that'd be big. But then you have to come right back home and play Duke on Tuesday. They rescheduled the UNF game for Thursday, which whatever. And then you have to go back to Miami, play them again next Saturday. So these next 3 games are a little rough, and then after that, kind of eases up a little bit. You go play Georgia Tech, you get Wake at home. I think you have Pitt in there, if my math's correct. So there would be some chances after these next 2 weeks. It's just the ACC is so down that I think Florida State has to be in that we have to win every single game mindset. Every game has to be a must win, which, is crazy to say for January 14th, but I think a lot of teams are in that mindset of if we want to make the tournament, we have to start winning now and get some quality wins.
So speaking of playing Syracuse coming up, this episode will be released the day of the game. Do you think Florida State is the favorite here? Is that the feeling in Tallahassee, or is it more that Syracuse is the favorite, or a pick 'em? How are people thinking about the game?
I think it's going to be pretty close to pick 'em. If anything, a 1 to 2 point favorite on either side. But I could see either team being favored coming into this. But Vegas has surprised me with the Florida State lines recently. They were favored by 5 against Louisville, which really surprised me, and then favored against, I think it was like 6.5 against Miami, which completely shocked me. There's something Vegas is seeing in this team that I am not. So maybe they have that same mindset for this game where they may favor Florida State by 2.5 against Syracuse, but I don't know because they really have not played well away from home outside of the Jacksonville Classic, which that's a 2-hour drive from Tallahassee. It doesn't really count. But I talked about the South Carolina game earlier. That was ugly. I was at that game. The first half they were great, and then South Carolina goes zone, and Florida State couldn't do anything. NC State, they won, but it wasn't pretty, and NC State isn't that good. Wake Forest was the worst offensive performance Florida State's ever had or has had since 2013, I believe it was, against Virginia. So they really have not looked good away from home. And it will be interesting to see how they perform in this game and to see how Vegas predicts that going into the game.
All right, Austin, I'm going to let you go soon. But before we do, there are two questions that have really been on my mind. And one is, so you're a former Florida State manager.
Yep.
Who were some of the best players and the coolest guys that you were on the teams with?
So as far as best players, I tell this story every time. It's literally my first week being a manager. We go work our tailgate, the recruiting tailgate for the football game. And then after the game, it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I get a call from one of the grad assistants like, "Hey, can you come up to the gym and rebound?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." So my first season was John Isaac's first year. And I'm rebounding for John Isaac for about an hour. And in that hour, I think he missed 3 shots while dealing with a bum ankle. It was one of the most insane workouts I've ever seen. It wasn't like he was just doing simple stuff. He was doing really skilled stuff. And I'm just sitting there just amazed going, if this guy looks like this all season, ACC's in some trouble. And I still believe if some chemistry things had worked out that season, or if he even comes back a second season like he really wanted to, he was going to have huge impact on that team. Trent Forrest is, the coolest guy. He's one of the 3 best players in program history just for what he did for that program. He's second all time in steals, first all time in wins. That's the guy that set the mentality, set the culture. Everybody looked up to him. He may have not said the most on the court, but when he did say something, everybody knew he meant it. And he just had those leadership qualities that, you look these last 2 years ago, man, if they had Trent Forrest on this team, what kind of team are they? I really, really, really wish he'd gotten that 2020 tournament. Just as good of a team as Florida State was because Trent Forrest was making that team run at a super high level. Just game-winning shot after game-winning shot, just knew what to do, never got too emotionally high, never too emotionally low. Just the perfect guy for a Leonard Hamilton team. Those 2 guys in particular, or I should say Fiondu Kamagele too. He's the guy that should have stayed another season. But that 18-19 season, he had that game against y'all in the Carrier Dome where he just lit y'all up from the high post, and it was fun to watch because he was a really special player.
I'm also Canadian, so I happen to be a bit of a fan of his. And that brings me to my last order of business. I'm a Green Bay Packer fan, and it's become apparent to me that you are a Minnesota Viking fan.
Yep.
So I asked this mostly as a Packer fan and not as a journalist. Which team has gone lower than your expectations this year more? Florida State men's basketball or the Minnesota Vikings?
Minnesota. I mean, I expected Florida State to be a little rough around the edges. I didn't expect them to be 9-5 at this point. I thought they'd beat South Carolina. I thought they'd beat Florida. Florida just started off strong, and now they're kind of coming back down to earth. But yeah, Minnesota, it's like I expected. I guess I expected 9-8. I got 8-9. So I mean, big whoop. But I also came in this season with lower expectations than everyone else that's a Minnesota fan because team's really, it's top heavy, but there's some lot of talent on that team. But I just kind of had that feeling coming in that I think Zimmer message had kind of run its course. It's hard to be a coach of the same team for 8 years when you're not winning like a Bill Belichick or a Sean Payton or even Mike McCarthy when he was in his golden days in Green Bay. So I kind of had that feeling coming into the season and kind of came to fruition. Kind of.
Well, Austin, from Kirk Cousins to Matt Cleveland, thank you for giving us all the information today. Really appreciate it, and hope to have you back on later.
Of course, appreciate it, man.